Welcome back to Landmarks Discovered. In this episode, we'll visit the 2020 recipient of the Preservation Foundation's Ballinger Award.
The Preservation Foundation's Ballinger Award was created in 1988 to honor Robert I. Ballinger, who served as chairman on the Landmarks Preservation Commission and was actually one of the first people to restore one of Meisner's great homes here in Palm Beach. Ballinger didn't actually name the award after himself. It was commissioned by Barbara Hofstadt, who is known as the mother of preservation in the town of Palm Beach. And she thought it was a great way to recognize property owners who put in the time and the effort to restore these beautiful historic homes.
Yes, and I think that one of the things that's so important about the award is that it really highlights the individuals that make the Landmarks program work. Without them, we wouldn't be able to preserve all of these incredible buildings. And so we're so grateful to people like the Simmons and all of the past recipients of the Ballinger Award and people that take on these projects to preserve the history for everyone to enjoy. Built in 1891, Duck's Nest is one of the few remaining resources from the pioneer era in Palm Beach.
And one thing that's interesting about Duck's Nest is that it stayed a single-family home throughout its whole existence, unlike Seagull Cottage, which became part of the Breakers Hotel and then moved back and is currently used by the Royal Poinciana Chapel.
Yes, and I think that it's also interesting because it really shows the evolution of not only the island, but this individual residence. There's so many different additions that have been added onto the building over time.
Exactly, and it's so interesting to see these additions because it really starts as a prefab kit house, and then you kind of see professional architects working on this house throughout its existence.
Originally, Duck's Nest was brought down by barge, and there were two gable-ended roofs that really comprised the entire building. After that, in the 1920s, there was a tower addition that was built to the north, and then to the south, another tower addition was built in the 1940s. In preparation for this episode, we started thinking about the evolution of the building, and some of the presentations that have been given in the past present evidence that differs from what we actually found in our archives.
Yes, we always thought that the main round tower was completed by John Volk, but it really looks like it was built probably in the early 30s by one of the pioneers. And when Volk came to do the north side in the 1940s, it was really his plan to kind of make the house more symmetrical.
Which is interesting because when you think about that south tower, it doesn't really indicate that it's representative of John Volk's work, but it is representative of vernacular architecture that you would have found in pioneer era homes.
Yes, and what's really interesting is through this evolution of Duck's Nest and the research that we did, we also found that Marion Sims Wyeth gave some plans to the family as well when they were looking to redo Duck's Nest. And in Wyeth's mind, the tower should have been removed because he really wanted to look more like a classical architecturally built building.
And so it would have been all one story if the family had decided to go with Wyeth's design. So we could see that his drawings are dated just a few years earlier than when John Volk was hired to execute the tower on the north end.
Yes, and John Volk also added the pool and the Victorian bathhouse, really lending to that Victorian theme of Duck's Nest.
And speaking of pioneer era buildings, you can really not talk about Duck's Nest without talking about the building immediately to the south, which is Bethesda by the Sea.
Yes, so that is the second iteration of Bethesda by the Sea, and kind of this Victorian Moorish architecture style was built by the congregation when they realized they needed more space from that tiny, almost one-room schoolhouse-looking building.
Yes, and Duck's Nest was actually built by the Maddock family, which was one of the first pioneer families to move here. And Bethesda by the Sea is the second iteration, is still occupied by a descendant of the Maddock family. I think what's particularly fulfilling about Duck's Nest receiving the Ballinger Award is that we, as an organization, were so involved in saving that building from demolition. The education work that we do through our series like Landmarks Discovered is so important, but also our advocacy work is incredibly important to preserving the town's architectural heritage. And we, I think, put quite a lot of effort forth in trying to protect this building.
And when we talk about that, like, preservation battle, it's so important to realize that the authenticity of these structures is so important. And when we look to demolish a building because it's old and then rebuild it in new materials, we lose that sense of place and character of that building. And I think through this rehabilitation, you see the originality and the authenticity of this building.
So this is just a great example of what we do as an organization to help the community preserve its heritage. The advocacy work of the Preservation Foundation is just one small piece of a successful landmarks program here in town. It also takes private property owners who are willing to take on these projects. And the Simmons who purchased Duck's Nest were really the heroes of this story, that they were willing to step forward and take on this project. And we had an opportunity to sit down with Julie Simmons to talk about the history of the building and its restoration.
We feel fortunate. I think people who ride their bikes down the lake trail and they look up and they see Duck's Nest, and it does come out of nowhere because there's a lot of big, imposing houses of Mediterranean style and all different styles, but Duck's Nest is totally unique into itself. But one of the other interesting parts of Duck's Nest is the name Duck's Nest. And I didn't know what Duck's Nest stood for, and I'd heard different stories. One was that Henry Maddock had called his wife Ducky, or that conversely she had called him Ducky. And then the other story we'd heard was that there used to be ducks in the water that was just east of the house. And I sort of scratched my head and said, water? How can there be water on the east side of the house when it's all land all the way to the ocean? And when we first bought the house and came in to really think about how we were going to renovate the house and use it for our family, there were certain things we loved. And we knew we wanted to keep the front stairs. We knew we wanted to keep the living room area the way that it was. We loved the loggia, the screen room with the room we're sitting in now, which is now the loggia. And we loved the 2 bedrooms upstairs with the old beadboard and the big bay window. The second floor bedroom has this charming bay window with a vanity in it, and we wanted to keep all of that exactly as it was. And the conundrum became the area to the right when you come in the front door, which was a bar, which was charming, and then there was a dining room, which at one time had been a bedroom, and the dining room was great, and behind that was a kitchen. We kept the kitchen exactly where it was, and on the second floor, the only thing that Landmarks had asked us to do, there had been an addition that was done in the 20s and then another one that had been done in the 70s, and there was a long, skinny window on the second floor. And Landmarks had said, if you can change that window, that would be terrific. And so we ended up moving the stairway. There had been a stairway that was on the east side of the addition, and we moved it to the west side. And we kept it, it's this little skinny stairway. It's charming and wonderful. It would never have been able to be done now because it's not to code, but it was enough in the same place that they allowed us to do it. So it goes up to the second floor. There's 2 bedrooms in this wing. There's a 3rd bedroom to the north. And that bedroom is where the old skinny bedroom used to be. And we renovated that room, and we used a lot of the old beams. When we first came into the house and we started pulling things down from the ceiling, we found a lot of old beams, and in those beams, we found the stamp for Henry Maddock and Son, Lake Worth, because it was before Palm Beach existed. And so it was Lake Worth. We still have those that we are cutting and putting into a shadow box along with the pieces that are numbered. And so we used a bunch of the old beams in the north bedroom, and we used a bunch of the old beams. We took the house on the first floor was all flat ceilings, and we decided to mimic the gables from the outside to the inside, and so we used some of the old beams to do that. And in some cases, when we had to use a new beam, we took a hammer out and hammered it up and made it look old. So you really can't tell which was the old and which was the new. It was really important to keep it looking as old as possible. When we first looked at Duck's Nest with the windows with all the stained glass in them, and they had a lot of the windows still had the wavy glass in them. Not every window, but a lot of them did. So we restored the windows, we restored the stained glass, we restored the wavy glass back to the center portion of the window. A lot of the windows are original, and the fact that they have survived all these storms and the elements down here is amazing. When we first bought Duck's Nest, we had been working with a designer from Atlanta and Jacksonville named Phoebe Howard. We want everything to feel old Florida, and so Phoebe and I set out, and we just scoured the antique stores, and we would barter and deal, and then we would say, no, we want these antique dealers to do better. And I think that Phoebe has done a great job. We work really well together, and I think she just hit a home run. I feel so fortunate that we are now the custodians of Duck's Nest, and I hope that there can be lots of other families who can take on projects and renovate them. It's not nearly as daunting as it seems. It does take time, it takes research, and I think I found the research to be totally rewarding. I learned so much about Palm Beach. I learned so much about Duck's Nest. I learned a lot about the whole area of the North End.
This episode is unique in that we actually did 2 interviews, and we, as a result, get the perspective of not only the homeowner, but also one of the architects involved in the project. So we sat down with Megan Ford of Seabreeze Building to tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges and opportunities involved.
So Seabreeze and myself were lucky enough to collaborate with Roger Jansen on the Simmons main house, and it was an incredible team, and we got to do it again at the Duck's Nest. Brian and Julie went above and beyond in order to rehabilitate the Duck's Nest. They dedicated a lot of time and resources in order for this to last for generations to come. The biggest challenge of this project was to preserve the exterior and completely reinforce structurally the interior. We did complete new foundations throughout the middle 1891 section and the 1920s North Tower, but we poured it from the inside, and we braced the exterior siding with shoring and bracing so that we could keep as much of the exterior as possible. So the foundation, there were a few issues with this house. The framing was one of them, and the foundation was another one. This house was basically built on bricks, which acted as piers, and the bricks weren't grouted, they were just stacked. And then in one of the areas, when we removed the lattice work for the crawl space, there was a section that was just reinforced by a stump that someone had put under. So part of the central portion of the South Tower had bricks that were stacked and then a stump in the middle. We kept as much of the exterior as possible. I would say 75% of the exterior siding and shingles are original to the house. In order to structurally reinforce the house and keep that, we had to shore and brace the exterior and reinforce from the interior. On the west and east elevation, all of the siding and shingles are original. The North Tower addition is where we added new shingles to match the original. The coins on the west elevation are still original and were never removed. The interior doors and windows, 80% of them are still original. In order to do a lot of the structural reinforcement, we had to remove the whimsical molding that was on the soffit, and we had to remake a lot of it. So we had craftsmen, some of the best craftsmen and woodworkers that were working on site for 4 months straight. They had a wood shop basically on site in the yard, and they were recreating the moldings here. The more people learn about the architectural traditions of Palm Beach, the more likely they are to embrace those traditions and build in that manner.
In addition to not only being a great preservation story with this building being saved from demolition, one of the reasons why Duck's Nest received the Ballinger Award this year is because they really maintain the overall feeling of the building, even down to the decor, which reflects this old Florida lifestyle, which so much of Florida and the island has moved away from. So it's really this snapshot into the past when you walk into that house. It transports you.
It does. It has a very strong sense of place.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Landmarks Discover, recognizing the 2020 recipient of the Ballinger Award. Congratulations to the Simmons and to their incredible design team.